Thank you, Anurag. My name is Mahesh. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic,
Hi,
entirely by
Mahesh.
the grace of
Welcome.
God. You guys, I am sober today. It's a great privilege to have been asked to share in today's meeting. And it's a wonderful thing that we are having this kind of a meeting where we have a audience from all over India listening to the different opinions offered by different people from different places. It's a very rich experience as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, you know, today I wish to speak about myself, about my experience, and my certain views that I have about my study of the big book. So, you know, at the end of every gratitude day, it's a custom to give a medallion to the person who completes the number of years or whatever the time period that he has spent in AA as a sober alcoholic using the program, on which there is an inscription to thine own self be true. So today I would like to make another quote of Shakespeare that also was from Shakespeare. I would like to quote this particular sentence, what he said: speak what we feel, not what we ought to say. So I shall be speaking and sharing with you what I particularly feel regarding the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and my own experience with regard to my association with fellow alcoholics. At the outset, I would like to make it very, I am absolutely of the opinion that nobody is in this fellowship accidentally. It's only by divine intervention that we enter this fellowship. Mine was such a case. It happened long back. I would like to say a few words about the big book that I possess right now. Is the third edition, which was given to me in 1981 by an American girl called Pam Yarden, who had come from Wisconsin and was my house guest. Seeing my pattern of drinking, even though she never broke her anonymity, as a parting gift, she left this big book on the table and went away. And I looked at the book. It had the blue cover, written Alcoholics Anonymous on top of it. I somehow did not want to, or I didn't have the uh, what you call the choice of calling myself an alcoholic. So I felt that this came from an American girl, so of a different culture, it doesn't apply to me. That was the time I was living with my ex-wife, and in 1983, till then I never opened the big book. In 1983, on April 3rd, when my ex-wife left me, that was the time when the bottom fell from under me, and I didn't know what to do. I trudged my way back to my mother's house, and I went on a binge as usual. It was April 15th when my brother took me to Coorg, and I was drinking around the clock at those days. And when I felt that I just couldn't bear it any longer, I told my brother that I'd like to go back to Bangalore. I had hit a rock bottom so badly that from every which way if I looked, I just couldn't see any kind of light at the end of the tunnel. So I took his motorcycle and started driving off with against his permission. He came and joined me, and he wouldn't let me drive. The motorcycle, I think, traveled about 17 kilometers and conked out in a place, a small hamlet called Titimati, which was incidentally where I received the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. I took shelter for the night at one gentleman called Harish Stee, who ultimately became my sponsor. He was the only recovering alcoholic in the entire district of Coorg. And I was not permitted to travel further because I had to go through a game sanctuary. So they said elephants on the road, so you have to travel only in the morning, next morning. My brother arranged for my stay at Harish's place, and he offered me a drink. And as we were drinking, and I found that he was still sipping his coffee, when I asked him why he didn't drink, he said, "No, I used to drink, but I have stopped." And then looking at me strangely, he asked me, "Why do you have a problem?" He asked me. That is the time when the floodgates opened. And I told him that I hated the stuff, but I couldn't do without it. And later on, when he started sharing about himself, it was as if he was talking about myself, about my own story. But nonetheless, whatever it was a kind of relief when I heard him say that I suffered from this incurable disease and there was a way out. And he told me about his story that he had stopped 6 years earlier. And he said, "I'll take you to a place where you'll meet a lot of people of your own kind, some rich, some poor, some from different walks of life, some people whom you probably know or not know, but all having bonded by the commonality of the problem of alcoholism." So he drove the next morning to Bangalore, and that's how I attended my first meeting. Even though he told me not to drink before I came to the meeting, I was bending my elbow all through. And I reached the meeting just about when there was 15 minutes left in the meeting. But nonetheless, after the meeting, the whole lot of us went to a hotel for dinner. And he offered me, he said, "If you might as well make this your last drink." And he offered me a beer. I somehow, today when I look at it, I find it, strange that I refused. And that was also some kind of an ominous decision that I had made, because I said, if I don't drink, because I was touched by his gesture, the kind of help that he was rendering. I had never found, until then, and seen or met anyone who did anything without an angle. So here was a man who was, doing something for a guy whom he didn't know at all, and yet wanting to help me in whatever way possible that he was. I still was not very, sure about what the program was and anything about Big Book. I never opened the Big Book. But anyway, ironically, that was the Big Book sent by him through this American girl. And when he asked whether he could give me a Big Book, I said, I already possess one. And he said, "Can you show me that?" When I showed him the Big Book, he said, "This is the book I sent through Pam about 2 years ago." And that was also a kind of a divine intervention, I felt. So here I was, when I'd thrown my, hands up in utter despair. I was literally delivered to the doorsteps of a guy who became one of my true friends, who passed away, ironically, 10 years ago of lung cancer. And I still remember 1985 when I suffered from my first heart attack. He asked me, "How did it happen?" I said, "You are next." And he locked himself up in his estate. And he said, "I'm a double winner." He had given up cigarettes. But ironically, he died of lung cancer. Anyway, putting these things aside, I would like to share with you today what I particularly have received through this fellowship in the basis of my association. I've been associated with this fellowship for nearly 4 decades now. I am one of those lucky guys who happen to be a first time winner. I never looked back ever since I met Harish. I never took another drink. That was absolutely, God sent for me. That's the reason I said nobody is in this fellowship on his own, of his own plans or whatever. It is a divine intervention. The way things happened to my life. I mean, this kind of a realization didn't happen overnight. One day I was sitting all alone waiting for other members to come to a meeting at the St. Anthony's Friary. And suddenly it occurred to me that how is it possible that my life has taken some kind of a positive turn and I can look forward to rebuilding my life where even despite being 40 years old. I had a drinking thing about, I started drinking from the age of 14. I must have drunk for about 25 years. And all that could happen to a drinking alcoholic happened to me. I suffered very badly in every possible way, whether it was money matters or being employed or relationships. My wife of 19 years left me, and today, ironically, I have been married again. I have a wife who is married to me for about 32 years. And my ex wife never saw a sober day of my life. And my present wife has never seen a drunken day of my life. And it is, truly amazing because today my wife has been witness to the number of sponsees who come to my house and I talk about the program. And she seems to know more about the program than anyone. And every time when I refer to what doctor's opinion, Dr. Silkworth says, is very true. When I am restless, irritable, or discontented, he says, she always sends me packing to her meeting. Well, to begin with my understanding of doctor's opinion, I would like to make it very clear that Dr. Silkworth, William Duncan Silkworth, a very remarkable man who treated over 40,000 alcoholics in his lifetime, and he was the head of one of the biggest institutions in America treating alcoholism and addiction. He was the one responsible for defining the first two dimensions of the disease, which still stands today. Dr. Silkworth, when he proffered his, when he talked about giving an opinion, the doctor's opinion at the beginning of the book, he has spoken a lot of things in terms of certain important points and observations that at the end of the letter that he has written in the introductory letter, he says that the alcoholic is bodily and mentally different from his fellow beings. And sometimes the alcoholic is an outright mental defective. I totally agree with it because personally speaking, I could relate to it very easily. And the second thing is he also defines, there are certain salient points he makes in the doctor's opinion. The second point he talks about is about the difference between the temperate drinker and the chronic alcoholic. When he was treating alcoholics and addicts in his hospital, his observation was that the temperate drinker never returned after being told that all the repercussions that he could face on reckless drinking, etc. And those were the days when there was depression and prohibition. And he found that the people who repeatedly came back were the chronic alcoholics. And he observed one important thing, that when a chronic alcoholic drinks, there is a manifestation of a physical allergy. That means he metabolizes alcohol differently, creating acetaldehydes in his stomach, which creates a craving in him, and the craving leading to an obsession. So he is unable to stop. And I have a very good friend of mine called Tommy, who always said, when this particular sentence was, you know, told to people, that the first drink does the damage, he would always say, if you stand in front of a railway line, it's a, it's the engine that kills you, not the last bogie. To make it very clear how the first drink really makes the thing. And I also wish to throw some light on the third dimension, which was inadvertently mentioned by Dr. Carl Jung in 1931, when a patient of his, Roland from America, went to see him about his drinking problem. When he advised him about his drinking, he couldn't do what he was advised, and he went back to Dr. Carl Jung again. And that was the time he said, yours is a hopeless case. Not much light had been shed on, why chronic alcoholics drink the way they do. And so he told him that, isn't there any hope for me at all? He asked. And that is the time when he said, I have known stray cases of alcoholics who have had sustained abstinence from alcohol as a result of some profound religious experience or spiritual awakening. So that is how the spiritual aspects of the program was brought to light in 1931. So he introduced him to the Oxford group then. Now, when we read the big book, in Bill's story also, when Abby comes to talk to his childhood friend, he tells him how he had been able to stay away from alcohol. He said, I have religion. And what I couldn't do for myself, God could do for me. And he tells him also how two people came to the court to bail him out when he was drunk. And those two people were none other than a guy called Sebra and Roland, who bailed him out. And then after 2 months of abstinence, that's the time he visits Bill W. to tell him how he had stopped drinking. That was one thing. And secondly, the more important aspect of the observation of Dr. Silkworth was, today, when we talk about the alcoholic being restless, irritable, and discontented, I use it as my own sobriety meter, despite the fact that I've been away from alcohol for a few years. But, with my alcoholic personality, I need to be constantly aware that I can be restless, irritable, and discontented when I do realize from my introspection that I am going outside the framework of the 12 steps. And I need to do something about it. I need to correct myself, which happens as a result of the daily inventory I take. Now, this inventory that we are talking about is nothing but based on a daily regimen that we observe. I observe a daily regimen, you know, straight from following the instructions given on page 86 and 87 of the big book as to what my day should be like. And today, after having been on this program for a long time, I keep recollecting how did I grow spiritually. First of all, I needed to be told that spiritual growth has nothing to do with my educational qualifications or my capacity to store knowledge or my intellectual achievements or not even my IQ, but has everything to do with the God given knack of knowing what is true about myself and accepting it and working out solutions to my problems through the 12 steps of the program. Now, what is a psychic change that Dr. Silkworth mentions? And he says, whatever these people have written in this book is absolutely true. And he has been very, very humble in saying there's some kind of religious, what you call instruction is needed. And what with our synthetic knowledge, we are not able to give that. And then whatever these people say in the program stands very correct. So I felt that when I was working the steps, it was necessary for me that the chapter, how it works, I had to understand certain aspects of the program where he clearly in chapter 5 it says, remember we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it's too much for us. But there is one who has all power, that one is God, may you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at a turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. And here are the steps we took, suggested as a program of recovery. Now, if we deeply observe the 12 steps, having read them so many times, we find that God has been mentioned 5 times in the steps directly. Step 3, step 5, step 6, step 7, and step 11. And of course, indirectly in step 12 too. And of course, it has to be understood well there. So for me, God was something that despite being brought up in a family where people were very orthodox, I still had a lot of problems with the spiritual aspects of the program. Now it has taken me fairly a long time. I have understood the importance of prayer and meditation and how it makes a very big difference in maintaining my sobriety today. And I like to quote the definition of meditation. As per the book, it very closely defines from Patanjali's own definition, which is ours is an awareness program. So he defines meditation as an unbroken flow of awareness towards the object of concentration. So today, it's so much easier for me. I have a God of my understanding, and I believe in Shirdi Sai Baba. I use him for my meditation and concentration when I look at his idol and close my eyes and focus on the awareness part of it. Today, when I have to teach anyone or share my experience with any sponsees, I go by the big book thoroughly. Even though I use the 12 and 12 as a referral and certain other books. But I wish to share with you about how our founding fathers, the first 100 alcoholics before the big book was written, how they used a 6-step program, which is mentioned in the big book in a story on page 292 of the third edition. The 6 steps that were used were: complete deflation was first step. Second was help and guidance from a higher power. Third was moral inventory. Fourth was confession. Fifth was restitution. And the last one was helping other alcoholics. This was the 6-step program, and this was the basis on which Bill W., by virtue of being, by a kind of a collective choice, started writing the big book. And when he came to chapter 5, I would like to quote what he had to say in his own words, how the 6 steps were converted to a 12-step program. I would like to read, I quote, "Our steps would have to be more explicit. There must not be a single loophole through which the rationalizing alcoholic could wiggle out. Maybe our 6 chunks of truth should be broken up into smaller pieces. Thus, we could better get the distant reader over the barrel, and at the same time, we might be able to broaden and deepen the spiritual implications of our whole presentation. As far as I can remember, this was all I had in mind when the writing began. Finally, I started to write. I set out to draft more than 6 steps. How many more? I did not know. I relaxed and asked for guidance. With a speed that was astonishing, considering my jangling emotions, I completed the first draft. It took perhaps half an hour. The words kept right on coming. When I reached a stopping point, I numbered the new steps. They added up to 12. Somehow this number seemed significant. Without any special rhyme or reason, I connected them with the 12 apostles. Feeling greatly relieved now, I commenced to reread the draft. Now, this is this tingles my senses really, because I keep thinking about the amount of, the what do you call, the effort that went into presenting us with a tailor-made program today, the 12 steps. We should be extremely grateful. I am extremely grateful for this. And I also possess an original manuscript which was gifted to me. And I found from that the writings, handwritten manuscript of Bill W., as to how many times he had scratched and rewritten when it came to, his own story and this thing, barring, of course, the doctor's opinion, which was given by Dr. Silkworth. Now, first description of a psychic change that Bill W. makes is about the description of Ebby in his own story, when he says that Ebby was inwardly reorganized. He was, I would like to refer this. 1 minute, please. Yeah. It's on page 12. It says, he was inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil. This was how he described Ebby. I think it was some kind of his own description of an emotional displacement or a psychic change, which he was attracted to. And Bill W. listened to him, and he found that he had some kind of a leaning towards, his belief that he could also do something in terms of his turning his belief into a faith. And yes, this was prior to the white light experience that he had when he rang up Dr. Silkworth and asked him whether he was hallucinating. He says, Dr. Silkworth tells him, whatever it was, do hang on to it, he says. And that is how I would like to just quote from Bill's story, another aspect of Ebby's meeting him. My friend, that is Ebby, suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Then he asks himself, would I have it? Of course I would. He never considered Abby to be, superior to him. He was his childhood friend. And if Abby could have it, why can't I? That was a kind of thought, the thing. Thus, I was convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. That is a major turning point that occurs in most of us. That is, building up our faith when we want him enough. And today, as I understand the program, I wish to, share with you about what I feel are very important points in terms of our character building and the changes that we must bring about. One is, of course, practicing patience, tolerance, and then, of course, at the top of it is, of course, surrender. Surrender, patience, tolerance, and then humility and gratitude. These are the 5 important points that I need to be very careful about all the time. And to me, surrender is not any kind of a passive renunciation, but it is an active struggle towards, release, towards the freedom that I'm seeking, and that I can get only through the 12 steps of the program. This is of paramount importance for me because I feel that I have made my share of mistakes. It is even though I have been in this program for more than 3 decades. I know that AA doesn't need me, but I need AA all the time. That's a reason I keep in touch. I still make meetings as much as my health permits. I've had a lot of health problems in these 30 and odd years. I've had a near fatal heart attack in 1985, followed by 3 more. I've had 1 open heart surgery. I've had 3 angioplasties, 2 stentings, and I've had 2 extremely bad accidents. But God had a master plan for me. And that was today being defined. That is to be of service to the man who is still sick. And I feel very grateful that I still have people coming through that open door of mine. And I extend whatever help I can within the limitations of my resources. But yes, 24 hours, I make myself available. I'm extremely grateful to this fellowship and to every alcoholic who, whether it's a newcomer or an old timer, I know that I need to learn to listen. And even though we have a slogan, learn to listen and listen to learn, my sponsor was a very tough guy. He told me, since you are a very intelligent guy, I would say, I would like to coin another slogan for you. He said, shut up and listen. And the third thing that he told me one day, I told him that he was all the time doing the talking, telling me about the program and the steps, etc. He said, I told him that I never get a chance to speak. And that is when we were going to his estate from Bangalore, he said, this is your time. Speak as much as you want. And I spoke till we reached Titimati. And it was a lament it was a lamentation all the time complaining about my life. And I said, I'm a sensitive guy. People can't treat me like that. And nobody respects me. For which he said, how can anyone respect you when you don't respect yourself? And the second thing that he told me was, well, you wanted me to tell you and make a comment about whatever that you shared right now. He said, you told me that you were a very sensitive guy. I will tell you one thing. He said, stop being sensitive and start being sensible. So this is something that I have been following, even though he's not with me, he lives with me in spirit. And I have another sponsor now called Jay Prakash. He's a doctor, and he's been about a decade and odd sober, but he is a very, very, solid guy as far as the program is concerned. I need somebody to take me off from time to time. I listen to him. And my suggestion to anyone who's into the program now or from any number of days, sponsorship is a very essential thing. And working the steps is absolutely imperative if one has to win. The trend I see today is, people do not read so much of the literature. I feel very pained to see that. And during my time, we also used to read from various topics of the book as Bill sees it. And then each one would be assigned a particular paragraph or a page, and they would share with respect on different topics for that matter. This gave me quite an amount of strength and inputs on the program. And we have the daily reflections which are read in meetings nowadays, but hardly anything is read, even though the big book is read at times. But 2.5 pages of chapter 5 and 3.5 pages of chapter 3. I'm not being critical or I'm not complaining. But then big book study has got to be done systematically from the very, very beginning, as I was taught. And that's a very important factor. Studying the big book as my mentor of those days, Trevor King, whose story was in the big book on page 342 of the third edition. He was instrumental in giving me a lot of ideas. He has written and shared. I studied the big book, he said, and he would always thump the table. He would say, don't read the big book, study it, he would say. And that is something that has become a very great asset in today's, my own association with AA. As I rightly put earlier, I need AA all the time. And I'm extremely grateful to you guys who have given me this opportunity, and to not only to share, but say a few things. Maybe I was not, I couldn't cover all the topics that I've made note of, but I'm extremely grateful that I could speak. Maybe on another occasion, when the right time comes, well, God will give me that opportunity to share whatever that has been quoted in the big book. And I thank the organizers of this program. My time is nearing the end. I'm just waiting for Anurag to tell me that. I hope.
Please carry on for another 5 minutes, Mahesh. You have time. Another
Okay,
5 minutes for you.
okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. Yeah, I would like to share with you people about the letter that was written in gratitude to Dr. Carl Jung in 1963 by Bill W. on January 10th, 23rd. He wrote to Dr. Carl Jung, this was the contents of the letter. This letter of great appreciation has been long overdue. May I first introduce myself as Bill W., co-founder of the Society of Alcoholics Anonymous. Though you have surely heard of us, I doubt if you're aware that a certain conversation you once had with one of your patients, Roland, back in the early 30s, did play a critical role in the founding of our fellowship. Though Roland H. has long since passed away, the recollection of his remarkable experience while under treatment by you has definitely become a part of AA history. Our remembrance of Roland's statements about his experience with you is as follows. Having exhausted other means of recovery from his alcoholism, it was about 1931 that he became your patient. I believe he remained under your care for about perhaps a year. His admiration for you was boundless, and he left you with a feeling of much confidence. To his great consternation, he soon relapsed into intoxication, certain that you were his court of last resort. He again returned to your care. Then followed the conversation between you that was to become the first link in the chain of events that led to the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous. My recollection of his account of that conversation is this. First of all, you frankly told him of his hopelessness as far as any further medical or psychiatric treatment might be concerned. This candid and humble statement of yours was beyond doubt the first foundation stone upon which our society has since been built. Coming from you, one he so trusted and admired, the impact upon him was immense. When he then asked you if there was any other hope, you told him that there might be, provided he could become the subject of a spiritual or religious experience. In short, a genuine conversion. You pointed out how such an experience, if brought about, might re-motivate him when nothing else could. You did caution, though, that while such experiences had sometimes brought recovery to alcoholics, they were nevertheless comparatively rare. You recommended that he place himself in a religious atmosphere and hope for the best. This, I believe, was the substance of your advice. Thus, he joined the Oxford group in Europe. And William James, in his book, Varieties of Religious Experience, which was given to Bill W. by Abbey, he defines truly transforming spiritual experiences are nearly always founded on calamity or collapse. That was the definition William James gave. So, to me, that coming to a rock bottom and never forgetting one's rock bottom is of paramount importance in our spiritual growth, all through our lives till we die. That's it. And with this, I'd like to thank Anurag for giving me this extra time. Thank you, Anurag.